Good evening. You're listening to the Coalition on Talk Radio on AM 790, your source for business, news, sports, weather, personal philosophy, Zen Buddhism, everything that's important in life. Tonight, folks, I'm flying solo. I've got no Chris Havoc. It's me. So we're going to try something new tonight. If you're out there on this great ending to a wonderful 4th of July, or as I now refer to it, Independence Day weekend, I want you to try and call in. We're going to try and take phone calls tonight. After years of being a serial talk radio caller, after harassing people, trying to ruin their lives, trying to spread fear, loathing, and chaos throughout the land, I'm going to put myself on the other end. I want you to call me and torture me. No limits. Listen, as a wise man I know likes to say, tonight we want to scare the squares. All right? So dial in at 401-437-5000. We do have a call screener. Unlike our earlier ventures, we do have to observe FCC rules, unlike our earlier adventures, and people are listening. Well, unlike our earlier ventures. So call in. It's open mic. Anything you want to talk about, however paranoid, however off the wall you feel, listen. If you're wearing aluminum foil, we want to hear from you tonight. It's been another crazy, wild, wonderful week here in Rhode Island politics. A special treat this weekend. I was out in Western Mass, but through the miracle of iHeartRadio, which we're also on, by the way, the miracle of iHeartRadio, I was able to listen to yesterday's Republican Party gubernatorial debate on the John Laughlin Show. Great show on Saturday mornings, AM 630. It's a great take if you're having a little bit of withdrawal from AM talk radio. Well run. It was 2 hours. The first hour with questions posed by John Laughlin. The second hour, I think it was a great way to handle it. He had folks call in with questions, and they had their call screener then, and their producer ask the candidates the questions directly. My takeaway from it, I'm not sure who's going to win the nomination. I know how I feel. I'm going to say it right now. I'm voting for Ken Block. To me, the Eddie Haskell Award for just overall swarminess. The Gee, Mrs. Cleaver, you look swell. Chill up my spine goes to the guy named Fung. He managed to dodge every question. The question I've put out to Twitter in the past remains the same. Is it possible for the Fung campaign to complete a sentence without the word Ken Block in it? I see very little in terms of specifics, in terms of programs. We're months into the campaign, and his entire campaign seems to be Ken Block either did or didn't, or in his mind, supported Obamacare. Again, curious approach for a state that's overwhelmingly Democratic if you're trying to win the election. Curious approach if you're going to cast shots at fellow Republicans. And even curiouser if you think that somehow that's all people care about, because people don't. I'm a big 2A Second Amendment guy. As important as that issue is to me personally, it's not going to sway the election. As critical as Obamacare is to the nation's future, not going to swing the election. What's ultimately going to swing this election is ethics, jobs, and some kind of combination of the two. It's going to be creating a business environment in this state where people feel like they can succeed, where people feel like they can invite people in to do business. It doesn't exist right now. And we see precious little other than Fung claiming credit for some type of jobs figure that was mythically created while he was the mayor of Cranston. Questions were asked from the peanut gallery about his administration of the police department in Cranston. You've got sexual discrimination lawsuits going on. You've got the state police effectively taking over day-to-day management of the Cranston Police Department. You've got individuals who are put on paid leave for years at a time, suddenly returning to the workforce in the, shall we say, the stunning retirement of the former Cranston police chief, who everybody still stands behind, by the way. You've got chaos in the very fundamental operations of a town the size of Cranston, and yet somehow he purports to run for governor. I thought Mr. Block was very, very effective in discussing the level of subsidies the city of Cranston receives from the state of Rhode Island. I didn't know that, and I consider myself pretty tuned in. I guess in comparing and contrasting Warwick with Cranston, you're looking at millions of dollars difference. And as Mr. Block pointed out, hell, I could keep the tax rate down if I'm getting millions of dollars in charity, who, by the way, is being paid for by the other citizens. I'm a native of Cumberland, and I say that loosely. Been there a long time. I don't know if that qualifies me a native or not. But effectively, I'm subsidizing the city of Cranston. I find that to be a revolting development. I thought aid to cities and towns went away, but I guess not. If you're crashing and you can juke the system and get a couple $1 million extra, yeah, I guess you don't have to worry about property taxes. There seems to be an ethical divide between Mr. Fung's behavior as mayor in approaching the money from Deepwater Wind and as a candidate for governor. Somehow, Mr. Fung draws a moral equivalence between not taking money from the Deepwater Wind people while he was, quote-unquote, actively running for governor, but somehow it was okay to take it. It didn't mean any sort of commitment when he took thousands and thousands of dollars from the Deepwater Wind people while he was mayor. That was okay. It's like there's two Alan Fungs. Alan Fung, candidate for mayor. Alan Fung, candidate for governor. Kind of scary, kind of appalling. You know, it just seems like he's playing the same game that conservatives decry when it comes to pulling the Bush card. Conservatives get very upset when, on a national level, the Obaministas blame the Bushies for everything. Yet at the same token, they're very, very happy to create this moral divide between when the Fung man was governor, the Fungistas, if you will, were running for mayor, and now when they're running for governor. It's like they're two split personalities. I don't get it. What the polls say, we're not sure. Mr. Fung refused to divulge any information about his polling. In his case, he claims to be running for the lead. I guess only time will tell. But the campaign remains a set of character assassinations from one candidate, and what's ultimately happening is an issues campaign, or an attempt at an issues campaign, by Mr. Block. You know, it's just frustrating, because if there was ever a time when no one's taking issues, and no one's taking issues seriously, yet right now we need desperately an issues campaign. And Fung seems to be running away from that. He seems to be saying, no, all I'm going to do is play whatever card my advisors have told me. I don't know. I think we need more than that. You're listening to The Coalition on Talk Radio, AM 790, your source for all that matters in life, including The Coalition. We'll be back right after the break, and hopefully we'll get some phone calls.
Manchester 65 is New England's newest live music and events venue. If you're not completely enjoying your current live music experience, there is another option. Manchester 65 is large enough to support touring acts, yet small enough for that local feel. For upcoming events, go to manchester65.com. Make it your place. manchester65.com.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at BigBrothersBigSisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Use your unique talent to help end hunger. The 1 of 52 Hunger Network is a grassroots movement that allows you, as an individual, to have a major impact on ending hunger. No fees, only action in just 1 week a year. Join this Strength in Numbers network at 1of52.net. Do you have an upcoming party, gathering, or social event? Want experienced mobile sound entertainment? Then contact DJ Psycho Eddie. Having worked with several local and national acts, as well as charities, nonprofits, and the area's best live event venues, DJ Psycho Eddie can get the party started and keep it going. Contact DJ Psycho Eddie today at 401-338-0787 for a free consultation, or look for DJ Psycho Eddie on Facebook.
The Dennis Miller Show on AM 790 Talk and Business. live your life inside out. There is not going to be any fulfillment to be found in the public place as far as a validation of your core beliefs of hard work paying off at some point. It has flipped.
Smart, entertaining, and relevant. The Dennis Miller Show, weekdays at noon on AM 790 Talk and Business. Your home for Yankees baseball.
Welcome back to the Coalition. We've got a brand new segment this week, and we're calling it the Joey Paolino Big Lie of the Week. Yes, folks, if you're a fan of the Coalition, or if you hate us and you still have this driver's ed film-like need to listen to us anyway, well, you know we're obsessed with casino gambling. And you know we're obsessed with Joey Paolino. We've had folks from the fine organization No Casino RI. I recommend them to your attention. We've had casino gambling experts on here. But, you know, we're engaged in a little bit of a public relations war going on here. We've told you about the big lies with casino gaming in general, the notion that it's a jobs creator. In fact, there's an organization called Jobs for Newport that would have you, and what I call Operation Change the Subject, have you think that the big issue here is jobs creation. It has nothing to do with putting mind-altering, addicting, aimed at lower-income folks, slot machines designed to bankrupt them effort? Not whatsoever. You have other people who claim that they're building an entertainment center with a spa. How about a brand-new spa, all right, in Newport? We've got other folks talking about what kind of rock and roll concerts they're going to have at a 500-seat arena, whatever. But the big lie of the week this week from our own Joey Paolino, former mayor, hey, I'm the mayor, and the ambassador to Malta, all right, who is telling us about the millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that the city of Newport's going to receive, in which case they'd never get anywhere else because the city of Newport is completely incapable of having any form of economic development. And thank God Joey Paolino is coming in to rescue the situation because without them, they would clearly wither and die. All right, they've somehow become one of the premier destinations in the Northeast for summertime activities with a healthy, growing, robust winter economy all by themselves, despite your best efforts, Joey Paolino. But, you know, what the hell? What's the truth mean? Well, anyway, so what we're talking about now is this $9 million payment. I mean, why not 90? Why not? Hey, I understand that the casinos are going to give $1 billion to the people in Newport. $1 billion. In fact, in a reverse triangular acquisition, they're going to take over the rest of the state of Rhode Island, thanks to Joe Boy Wonder Paolino. Well, here's the big lie for this week. Is there any guarantees on that? You know, ironically enough, one of the sponsors of an earlier segment today was an organization called Revel Casino, who entered, as we like to say in the Coalition, a new chapter in their life just a few weeks ago for the second time in 2 years. And this is not even a Donald Trump organization. They've entered into bankruptcy. Another casino, the Showboat in Atlantic City, just announced they're closing the doors. Yep, that's the kind of growth business we want to get into, folks. So, you know, what's the guarantee of this money? Is Joe Paolino going to sign a personal guarantee? Or does this strike you as eerily similar to the kind of promises made by 38 Studios? You know, 38 Studios, there was no personal guarantee. What happens, as is happening across the nation, when these casinos who promise all these cash payments end up asking for property tax abatements, as is the case in Tunica, as is the case in Vegas, as is the case of New Orleans, as is in the case of Atlantic City? Across the country, people are trying to break out of the agreements that they had that allowed them to build these casinos, build these, you know, slot machines, these black hole financial organizations that suck the lifeblood out of a community. And they're like, oops, never mind. You screwed up. You trusted us. So, folks, that's the big lie of the week from Joey Paolino. All right? I understand we have some callers. Is that true? Is it possible? Who do we have? Is there somebody on the line? Is this Russ from Pawtucket?
Absolutely. How you doing, P.O.?
Oh, great to hear from you. And what's on your mind today, young man?
I really got a kick out of your analysis there about the Newport situation and the jobs that won't be saved and the revenue that's going to be lost if we let that facility go to hell or just crumble.
You mean where it already is? Okay.
The reason I called up is I wanted to hear your analysis, maybe the lieutenant gubernatorial candidate's analysis about none other than Buddy Cianci jumping back into the fray again, and what that's going to mean for Providence and his electoral prospects this fall. What do you think?
Well, here's my take on Vincent A. Buddy Cianci. My wife has worked in Providence almost the entire time that we've lived in Rhode Island, 25-plus years. When I first moved to the city, the only people trolling the nightlife were folks involved in the alternative adult entertainment community. I saw the city progress. I saw the city on a mission. I saw the city with a purpose. Fundamentally, I believe that the level of corruption that exists in the remaining administrations post-Cianci equals or exceeds, particularly that of the Cicilline administration. And just the financial mismanagement that took place literally drove the city, well, we know where it's going. You know, we've had Mike Riley on the show a number of times. Really, bankruptcy is inevitable. Others would point back to the Cianci machine and say, okay, that was when some of these issues took root, when some of these pensions were put into place. Ultimately, I think it blows up the election. Ultimately, though, the difference is going to be what type of ground game. Russ, you've been involved in political campaigns before, as I understand. It's all going to be about the ground game because, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, a lot of the folks who supported Cianci years ago.
Due to my experience in campaigns, that ground game is a term everyone throws around, but it's really hard to do. And I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit overrated because no one's really great at it. It's very hard to get people to vote, you know, regardless of how good you are at whatever they call it, ground game.
Well,
I think name recognition is the key in an election, in every election. I think that's most of the candidates who win are the ones with the most name recognition. And because of that, I think that combines precisely with the sentiment you just laid out in, you know, what you just said with respect to how the corruption has been the same, if not worse, from Buddy's successors than it was when Buddy was actually in office. And the fact that the city thrived in the 90s when Buddy was mayor, I think those two sentiments combined along with his name recognition, I think he's not only going to win the election in the fall, I think he's going to get a majority of the vote. Tell me what you think.
Well, here,
am I on? Am I off?
Well, you know, the Cicilline ground game is legendary. Now, is it legendary in its own mind or not? And I guess to a certain degree, with Cicilline running, having to run only a shadow campaign at this point, unfortunately. We've had Mr. Fecto on a number of times. We're doing whatever we can on our level to help him move forward. But is Cicilline, out of just pure personal spite, going to take whatever organization he has and is going to turn it on Buddy? I guess a lot depends on who the Democratic nominee is. You know, this election has all the capacity to be Shakespearean on two or three different levels. You've got, you know, on one hand, you know, I don't know, there's a great book out there by Edwin O'Connor called The Last Hurrah. And if you haven't read it, I commend it to everybody's attention. Just a wonderful campaign book. You know, it's set 30 or 40 years ago, but the story is timeless. I'll let you read it and draw your own conclusions from that.
Oh, absolutely. I'll have to pick it up.
But, you know, it still comes down to, are there voters left, are there voters in the city who still remember the Buddy years fondly, or there are such incredible cultural differences in the city in the last 10, 12 years that have taken place with the emergent Latino voting bloc, with the immigrant situation, with the school situation. You know, unfortunately, I wonder if the remaining population from his era, which is predominantly East Side based, is going to be opposed to him because they hated him 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think the former analysis is correct. I think there's far more people that are nostalgic and liked the city when it didn't have a pothole every 10 to 20 feet on the road.
Well, I mean,
I think the average person doesn't think the corruption's left. I think it's been, I think it's been multiplied since he's been gone. I think he's going to be a really tough out this fall.
Well, you know, and I hope so because, you know, when you look at the other candidates against him, you know, I mean, Solomon, you know, talk about ethical challenges. You know, they're out there. I don't have to repeat them. Well, you know, in the coming weeks, I will beat it to death. What the hell? You know, I mean, but, you know, how can any of these people, you know, you've got this other guy, Brett Smiley, who's parachuting in, no executive experience, you know.
Oh, that's Brett Smiley. That's the guy that says you need to know a guy in Providence to get anything done. Yet he was the city's lobbyist to lobby the state legislature and got paid $3,000 a month, even when the legislature wasn't even in session.
Right.
That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, you mean the guy who got it was put in
The
charge.
non-connected guy, basically.
Yeah, the guy who was put in charge of the water board with his extensive industry experience in water.
Just remember,
the guy who doesn't know anything about water, who was in charge of the water board.
Sometimes,
who claims, by the way, that in Providence, I guess he is making a true statement. You do have to know somebody, and he's living proof of what he's talking about.
Well,
so, that's
irony is something that isn't present in large quantity here in Rhode Island. But we'll just leave it at that. But Russ, it was great to hear from you. I think Russ has been on the show before. We're gonna have him on again.
Can't wait.
It's I got to throw in the net.
We're gonna have that casino debate. You and I are gonna have that casino debate in studio. No holds barred.
No, let me go public. I'm challenging Joe Paolino anytime, any place, Joey Boy, to come in here and debate casinos.
How about at the Superman building?
We could do it at that.
Great location.
I'm challenging him to come in.
Hey, before you let me go, Tony, best of luck in your lieutenant gubernatorial bid. Best of luck, my man. We don't need to be spending millions of dollars.
Tony's not in the air yet. That was a secret surprise.
Hey, just like you guys talking about, buddy, just like my race, sometimes at the end of the day it comes down to who would you rather have a beer with. In a non-presidential year election, when people are not very interested, after all the bloviating we do here on the air, after all the op-eds have been written, it comes down to who would you rather have a beer with. Now think about the current people running for mayor of Providence. Who would you rather have a beer with?
Silence. No, it's great to hear from Russ Moore. If you have a chance, he usually weighs in on Mondays on the on Go Local Prov. Always has an interesting take. Lately, we haven't seen eye to eye in the casino issue, although I respect his political prowess and acumen on all things other than that. But it was great to have him as our first caller. He was our first true caller
in the history of the coalition.
And we've been on the air at a variety of venues for well over a year and a half.
Except for when your wife calls in and says, get home.
If you're listening out there, we'd love to have you call in. 1-888-345-0790 seems to work the best. It's an open mic. We've got a very, very special guest coming on after the break. We'll divulge a little bit about him. His name is Tony Jones, if you haven't met or heard him before. He is the Libertarian candidate for lieutenant governor. He can be found at a number of sources. I love his hashtag the best, though. I believe his hashtag is Shut It Down.
Shut it down.
All right. It's simple to the point. I was out on the trail this afternoon, kind of talking to people throughout the city of Providence, and imagine some of the people didn't cross the street when I when I went to talk to them. But people are intrigued. They see this as the natural progression, the next step from the Cool Moose Party. His promise, if elected, he will hire no one. He will take no salary.
Sorry, P.O., no jobs.
I wanted to, wait. A little birdie once told me that the head honcho in the not the Secretary of State's office, the Lieutenant Governor's office makes somewhere in excess of 150 simoleons a year
to hang around.
Hey, listen. Since irony and hypocrisy rule the day in Rhode Island, I'm very content here to weigh in and support Tony's position for the rest of the year to the election, and then say hi. We were just kidding and take the big pay job. I'm happy to do that.
I may, however, and it's interesting to see how people react to that situation, because the open secret is you get in with one of these campaigns and then they get elected and you get some sweet glorified welfare job. It's interesting to see people react to a situation where there will be no said welfare jobs. In fact, I may ask you to work for free.
So Tony will be joining us in full force. We're also going to touch on libertarian politics. The folks behind this show, the backers, the financial backers, are all
P.O.'s wife,
are all avowed libertarians. Because of our near-death obsession with Rhode Island politics and all that it has to offer, we haven't really done enough justice in the year running up to the campaign season and discussing libertarian politics, and that never became clearer this week when folks toured the major media outlets here in Rhode Island. And by the way, just as an aside, I grew up in New Jersey, and New Jersey has arguably one of the most densely populated states in the nation. As I like to explain it, take Pawtucket and make it a state. Yet has no television station of its own. Very little talk radio dedicated to New Jersey throughout the New York metropolitan area because you've got this squeeze going on from Philadelphia and New York. And yet here in Rhode Island, we've got all four major networks. We've got...
Not for long.
True. We've got a major player in talk radio in AM 630, our sister station. We've got a newly emergent AM 790. If you're a football fan, you'll get this analogy, but the gentleman most likely to be awarded the Matt Millen award for running a station into the ground, that would be the other station up the dial, which was once a force in it and could be if they ever got their act together. There's this intense media focus in the state. And so we play into that. And yet at the same time, with all those opportunities, I don't know if we've characterized or spent enough time really getting folks to understand the libertarian movement. So we're going to get right on that. And with our special guest, Tony Jones, you're listening to AM 790, your source for news, talk, business. Again, everything that matters, and the Coalition. We'll be right back at you, and we'll be taking calls.
Attention, gardeners, farmers, growers, homesteaders, and horticulturalists. Coming soon to 1889 Post Road in Warwick, Rhode Island, it's The Grow Store. For all your indoor gardening supplies, it's The Grow Store. Mike's Professional Tree Service offers top-of-the-line tree removal, trimming, stump grinding, stump removal, and so much more. Mike's Professional Tree Service will do everything to safeguard your home and property and is fully licensed and insured. Call them today at 401-823-7485 for a free estimate on tree service, tree removal, trimming, and tree care. That's 401-823-7585. Mike's Professional Tree Service are the tree experts serving all of Rhode Island. Online at mikesprotree.com. That's mikesprotree.com. Attention, gardeners, farmers, growers, homesteaders, and horticulturalists. Coming soon to 1889 Post Road in Warwick, Rhode Island, it's The Grow Store. For all your indoor gardening supplies, it's The Grow Store. Midday Records is a label that is comprised of local artists and exists for the sole purpose of helping other local artists find new opportunities and to help build a more thriving New England music scene. Midday Records hosts the area's fastest-growing music-related networking event, the Midday Social, books Midday Records presents shows throughout New England, releases compilations featuring local music, promotes bands through the Midday blog, are the co-founders of Music for Pause, and has recently started an artist development and management division. Stay up to date with Midday Records by checking them out on your favorite social media site like Facebook and Twitter, and find them online at middayrecords.com. That's middayrecords.com.
Welcome back to the Coalition. Just listening to the music. One love. You know, I'm here with Tony Jones.
I'm thinking about taking out $1 right now and putting it in your man's ear.
Welcome back to the Coalition on AM 790, your station for news, business, and all that matters in this world. We are taking calls today. We just had our first call, Russ Moore from Go Local Prov. You're welcome to call in. You know, we're focusing the next half hour or so of the show on the candidacy of Tony Jones, the Libertarian Party candidate for Lieutenant Governor. For some reason, I seem to have a mental block with Secretary of State. He is running for Lieutenant Governor. He is going to win the office of Lieutenant Governor. Ooh, did I say that? He is going to crush the office. The office will cease to exist within just a few short years, I hope, of his being elected to it. Tony, welcome to the show.
So we have a few, other than the hashtag shut it down. Also, what has surfaced is from the fine brain of Ken Block, that is Kenneth Block, a big man for a small job, which I think
is great. I think that could be T-shirt worthy. And then also a guy, Libertarian Jeff, he came up with a great hashtag for me, or a great logo for me, which is the Rhode Island Lieutenant Governor's official seal, an official seal for a job that does nothing. And across the top it says, no budget, no staff, no problem.
There you go. And I think we're going to take this sort of Rasta-like approach to the whole campaign. Tony, give us a little bit of background on yourself. Talk about yourself as a citizen, as someone who's been active in the community. Give us the background, the backstory.
So I'm the typical Rhode Islander with, real job, a fake job, going to school at the same time, and during that whole time trying to be as involved in the community as much as I possibly can. So because I believe that private charity is a better way than government programs, I'm involved with soup kitchens, and we just had the great event for the community food bank not too long ago. So that's kind of, we're going to carry that over into the actual campaign. So if there's an event going on and I'm invited, chances are I'll be there. If you're opening an envelope, give me a call. If you need me to cut the ribbon on a phone booth, give me a call and I'll be there.
So you actually have a job in the dreaded private sector.
Right.
And how long have you held this job, just ballpark?
Years.
More than 4?
Yeah. Probably close to 10, I would say.
Okay, so just let's put all the candidates in perspective. You've got A. Ralph Mollis. Okay, you've got A. Ralph Mollis. And you've got who I refer to as Catherine Taylor Chafee, who are older than you, significantly.
That's true.
And their total private sector experience combined in the last 25 years appears to be somewhere in the nature between 4 and 6 years. So what you're saying is, unlike the leadership, and I call Rhode Island government the true 1%, because you've got a select group of individuals who, in sort of a 80s Brezhnev style, have taken over this government and make an enormous amount of money, make a career, make a livelihood off of it, versus someone like you who works the same type of job that the average Rhode Islander does.
Now, as you know, P.O., of course, you know personally, I work all week or 40 hours plus at my day job, and then, of course, we work all weekend doing stuff like this.
Right. So your commitment to public service, someone a lot smarter than me once said that public service is supposed to be for people who want to help lives, not get one. It would appear to me that public service is actually an outgrowth, a direct relationship to your own personal philosophies.
And that is, kind of on the flip side of that. On the other hand, why I like to give back is because as much as we, down it a little bit and hate on it a little bit here on the show and on our general conversations, Rhode Island has been very good to me. I'm just a guy from the suburbs of Coventry, and I'm not doing quite well. I'm not at the height that you are, P.O., but for just a kid from a small town, I'm doing pretty good, and Rhode Island has been very good to me. And I'm, you're talking about being a little bit younger than the folks running and a little bit younger than the folks that I socialize with. I'm at the point where I'm looking to, possibly start a family, possibly buy a house. I would like to stay in Rhode Island for some godforsaken reason for the long haul. My parents are getting a little bit older. I think I have a vested stake in the success of the state, and this is where it starts.
Okay. Talk about the libertarian philosophy. You're running as a libertarian. Why the Libertarian Party?
I've been involved in the Libertarian Party for quite some time now, kind of as a young activist. Unfortunately, the party was it went dark for a little while. So I was involved with a group of young college students in 2010 to start the party back up. So we officially petitioned the National Party. We got bylaws. We did all that boring stuff. We started the party back up in 2010, and then in 2012 we were able to support getting Gary Johnson on the ballot, who was the presidential candidate. So the party was fairly active, I'm told, before my time, and then it went dark. And then in 2010, a group of guys, younger guys, and then Mike Rollins and some other folks who've been in the movement for a while, we started the party back up. So, there's a whole generation of voters out there that are hearing about the Libertarian Party for the first time through this campaign, through what we're talking about, and at the same time, they're hearing the message of being fiscally conservative and socially cool. And I think that's where a lot of people fall in. So I ask the government to run as lean as possible. I want them to be good taxpayer stewards of the taxpayer money, but at the same time P.O., as you know personally, I don't care if you smoke a little bit of marijuana. I don't care what you do in the privacy of your own bedroom, as long as it's between two or possibly more consenting adults. So the libertarians believe that that's none of their business. They're concentrated on the economics and on doing the right thing and on the non-aggression principle.
Excellent. Now, I've listened to you work your way through the various media outlets this week, and there seems to be this near death-like, vice-like obsession with why not work within the Republican Party? Why not emerge from why not, in a sense, the secret message being co-opt the Republican Party as part of your efforts?
Right. So I was asked earlier this week why I didn't work within the system, and as not being a typical politician, I was able to happily and forcefully say because the system sucks. And libertarianism in the Libertarian Party on the national level is a growing brand. We just want to work on bringing that idea here to Rhode Island. But remember, when you look at the hard numbers in Rhode Island, the majority of voters are, we talk a lot about Rhode Island being a Democratic state. The actual majority of voters are unaffiliated.
Right.
Like me and you, we were talking off the air. Because we're unaffiliated, are we going to vote in the Republican primary? Are we going to vote in the Democratic primary? We really have that option here. So what we're looking at, not necessarily co-opting the Republicans, and there's a lot of great Democrats, the Democratic Freedom Caucus and Democrats for Liberty, who agree with us on the social side, but aren't necessarily interested in the fiscal conservative. I think we could bring them over, but as far as co-opting the Republican Party, I think that our goal is to maybe get some of those unaffiliateds interested. And the fact that we're not a recognized party means that they won't have to give up their anonymity. So we're looking to bring them over.
The libertarian movement shares so much with both the conservative and the Green Party wings of the respective quote-unquote mainstream parties. One could argue we have different ways of getting there. But, when you think about it on the practical level, the libertarian movement is against crony capitalism. The liberty movement believes in non-aggression. The libertarian movement believed way before it was cool in marriage equality.
Way before it
was cool. We believe ultimately that the war on drugs is a grotesque failure.
It has been for quite some time. There's some conservatives, traditional conservatives, that have come over in the past couple years to really looking at the hard evidence, analyzing the data, and realizing, holy cow, I've been wrong all these years. The war on drugs, the just say no, has been an abysmal failure. Libertarians have seen that for quite some time.
Right. So, and we're not obsessed with the statistics of law enforcement because we see societally what has happened to individual ethnic groups as a part of the war on drugs. So we're not cafeteria conservatives. I know to myself, as much as I admire some individual members of the Republican Party, I can't belong to an organization that ultimately does not embrace marriage equality, that sees a status culture as something worth fighting for. I can't support a Mitt Romney, a John McCain, a Richard Nixon, a Bob Dole. I can no longer support the type of Republican Party that brought 38 studios to the fore in this state. The notion that I want small government when it suits me, yet at the same time, when several of the standard bearers of the Republican Party are actually members of government and are compensated highly for doing middle-level management jobs in government, I have an issue with that. So, to me, if it takes a generation to build a Libertarian Party, then I believe in an organization where I don't have to take opinion polls as to what I should believe in.
And on the other side of that, there's a lot of Democrats that I agree with on the social issues. We agree on the ending the war on drugs. We agree on marriage equality. We agree on some of the aspects of private charity, but sometimes it comes down to the non-aggression principles. So I believe that taking people's money through force is ethically wrong, and that's where there's a divide with the Democrats, and then, as you just spoke, that's how we have a huge divide with the Republicans. But I think that, me personally, we're looking at doing a political party in a different way than what a traditional political party has been about. So, we do what we have to do to, be legit with the Secretary of State's office and our paperwork, but you have people that are just interested in going to meetings, and that's not what libertarians like to do. So we're out there, we do Liberty Drinks all the time, and we're involved with private charity. We're trying to look at an actual quote-unquote party as a different organization. And I think that's where you're seeing a little bit of the discrepancies with people who have lost interest in the Republican Party, because it's not functioning as an alternative in Rhode Island.
In the minute or so we have remaining in this segment, what is your campaign platform for Lieutenant Governor?
So basically, I'd like to be elected as a placeholder. A lot of people know it as the Cool Moose Party. One of my political heroes, Robert Healy, he developed this platform quite a few years back. This last election cycle, he had over 100,000 votes. So in our opinion, 100,000 voters can't be wrong. So I would like to eliminate the office. I'd like to work towards abolishing the office. And in the meantime, if I were elected, I wouldn't take a staff. I wouldn't hire a salary. I would essentially, like our famous hashtag says, I would close down that office. It would save $1.1 million a year, or $4 million over the term. And in the meantime, we'd work to eliminate that office. Now, what we have here historically coming up that Mr. Healy hasn't had in the past is the possibility of a constitutional convention. So what I would like to see is, I am personally, and I'm not speaking for the party, I am personally for the constitutional convention, getting some good government folks in there. Then we would use the convention to eliminate the office. Sounds really boring, I know.
No, not at all. Ballpark, the chief of staff for the lieutenant governor of the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, what do they make?
They make close to 90, and then the lieutenant governor himself gets a little over 100, and then all the other guys combined, it's at 1.1 million a year now to hang out and do nothing.
You're listening to AM 790. That could end up to being real money. You're listening to AM 790, your station for news, talk, weather. Yes, the Exodus. Is there an Exodus taking place from Rhode Island as we speak? Based on statistics, many would argue there is. You're listening to AM 790, the Coalition on Talk Radio. With me in studio is a very, very special guest, Tony Jones, Libertarian candidate for the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Tony, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here.
Well, every candidate seems to have their own very special take on this office. It seems, Tony, are you familiar? Are you a comic book kind of guy, a cartoon kind of guy?
A little bit, yeah.
All right. If any of our listeners have ever read the cartoon Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin, the young boy, and his toy stuffed tiger who comes to life magically when parents aren't around, all right, has a game they call Calvin Ball.
Isn't that what this show is?
Yes. Well, Calvin Ball means you invent the rules as you go along. So it seems like, Tony, every candidate has got their own, even going back to the last election, which unfortunately Mr. Healy lost, their own unique take on, what I want to be when I grow up to be lieutenant governor. Tony, how did we get to this point?
So up until 2003, the lieutenant governor actually did have two jobs. He was the lieutenant governor, and then he also presided over the Senate. So he, did what the Senate president does now. He was the tie-breaking vote, et cetera, et cetera. That was eliminated in 2003, and ever since then it has been just to wait for the governor's demise. So everything that's been added since then would be the equivalent of us walking in here and saying, well, we're the promotions directors now, or we run this station now. It is the equivalent of just made-up stuff, which I actually don't have a problem with. But in my candidacy, and what I would be asking is that was done voluntarily. So, as you know, I'm a big supporter of the arts. As you can tell by my waistline, I'm a big supporter of hospitality. I would be willing to serve in any of those capacities, but I would do that voluntarily because those are my pet projects. I love arts. I love music. I love food. Let's promote those, but I'm not going to ask you to give me 100,000 large to do that because it's not right.
Part of the libertarian movement talks about, or really dives into the concept of being the volunteer. I'm sorry, what do they call it? Voluntarism?
Voluntarism. There's quite a few.
Right. So the whole notion of patriot, citizen, candidate /
pay me.
Right. We've evolved to a point where we have an entire generation of folks who have never worked in the, I talked about this earlier. They've never worked in the dreaded private sector. They have no real world experience. I hearken back to, a Helicon age years ago when Dan Connors, who really became one of the poster child for, the evil Rhode Island Senate, he became head of the Small Business Committee despite being in his early 20s and despite never having worked a day in his life. I mean, how did we evolve? And that's one of the reasons we're in the position we are in today. This past week you had breaking news from the Ralph Mollis camp. A gentleman was hired to be one of the chief investigators into the 38 Special scandal at $150 an hour. And after a global, or as Mayor Vincent A. Buddy Cianci used to say on these very same stations, after an intergalactic search, one of those great coincidences around. Consider the odds that the person most ideally suited to the job would just happen to be a cousin of the guy who's a Senate majority. Go figure.
Now, on the other side of that, except for possibly on the local level, it is a hardship to be a citizen politician. So, as you know, again, P.O., I have asked all of my friends and anybody, acquaintances, people on the streets, to help me out, collect signatures to get on the ballot. If you don't have a job, it's easy to get on the ballot. It's easy to get down to the Secretary of State's office during traditional business hours. Now, a little bit later on this summer when my girlfriend asked me, hey, let's go on vacation, you know what my answer is going to be? My answer is going to be, sorry, honey, I can't, because I spent all my vacation days getting on the ballot to run for lieutenant governor. So we talked a little bit about the Secretary of State's office and what they do if you're not in the good old boy system. And even if you're in a major political party and not in the good old boy system, if you're a citizen politician, if you're someone with stuff going on, it is difficult to gain ballot access.
Right. And which, on one hand, the poobahs complain about the lack of people running, yet at the same time, they present every obstacle imaginable to reaching the point where you can run a legitimate campaign.
So if you're already in office or you happen to be a lawyer, chances are you can, with no problem, get on the ballot. If you're working, and I hate to use the crappy buzzword working class, but if you're a working class person or if you're someone trying to run a business, if you're in the private sector and you're held to having to be on the job and do your job to keep it, it's difficult, very difficult now.
Yeah, and yet on this Independence Day weekend, we must remember that the founders, and these are a group of people that both parties love to pay homage to, were all people of independent means, independent business people, independent farmers, people who had a stake in the community, not because they spent an entire career running the community, but they actually had a physical, a financial, and an emotional investment in the community because this is where they drew their livelihood from.
Right. The community was good to them, and they wanted to give back, and that's kind of how I see myself. I feel like I'm in that situation. Also, we talk a little bit about term limits. It was an opportunity to, or it was set up to be an opportunity to, give back and then go back to the real world and take those experiences back and forth from the private sector into public life, and we very rarely see that anymore. If someone doesn't hold on to that seat like grim death, if they give up, it's probably because they're disgusted at what they saw and they don't want to run again, a la Mr. Chafee.
Well, and Mr. Chafee is, in a sense, the poster child for the entitlement 1% mentality. And when I talk about the 1% again, I talk about the notion that the true 1% in the country has become the government. The only sector of real economic growth in the Northeast Corridor is Washington, D.C. And the only sector of employment growth within the Northeast Corridor that's in real terms, other than entry-level jobs, hospitality jobs, things like that, is in government work. We cease to become a functional society where we create wealth. No, we are a society that emphasizes redistribution of wealth. And so when you have people who lose any connection and any perspective to the physical process, whether it be as someone who works on a production line, as someone who's a mechanic, someone who has their own small business, whenever you lose that connection to the creation of wealth, you cease to create wealth. And I believe that's the single biggest challenge in the state. Early on in the history of the coalition, we did an entire show where we did dramatic readings of the tax returns of a variety of not-for-profits, and you realize that a number of the most highly compensated positions in this state are people who run not-for-profits. Now, some of these folks are doing the work of the Lord. Other folks have created these not-for-profits as vehicles for their own political and financial gain. The other positions, you look at, and it's on both sides of the aisle. You look at someone like John Robitaille, who claimed to be the small business candidate, the small government candidate, yet immediately prior to his running for governor as a Republican, had a six-figure job working for the state.
Doing nothing.
Yeah, and he was yet one of the cadre of seemingly endless political communication hacks, whatever you want to call them. And yet these are the same people who believe in small government. It's small government for thee, not for me. So,
I think we have another T-shirt coming.
I like that. Excuse me. So Tony, what's the campaign strategy? What do you see happening in the next few weeks? You're going through your an admittedly challenging but successful signature process right now.
Right. We're out there right now. We've had people in almost in every town and city, and people have really stepped up to help me out. And of course, I've been out there personally. Which, not to get off topic too much, but if you see one of these poor guys standing out in front of your Stop and Shop, take a second and sign for him. You're not signing up for anything. You're not signing up to vote. You're not signing up to join a political party. You're not even signing up to say you support them. When you sign a ballot petition, it's just saying this guy for this office should be on the ballot. That's all you're signing up for. And people get nervous, and I understand that, but I mean, it's a tough situation to be in. It's almost the equivalent of being a door-to-door salesman. I was out the day before 4th of July, and I'm a pretty thick-skinned guy, but people were in a rush. They couldn't be bothered to sign. So if you see petitioners out there, give them a hand, help them get on the ballot.
Yeah, I think it was fascinating. You had this juxtaposition of Independence Day weekend with the pressing need to get signatures to get on the ballot. I mean, What's more fundamental?
And that's where it falls every cycle.
Right. What's more fundamental than preserving liberty than giving the opportunity for the citizen patriot to voluntarily announce that they're going to work for you and work for government? And at the same time, if you don't participate in this process, I firmly believe you cede your right to complain. Now, as someone who's made a livelihood out of complaining and whining and kvetching
and trolling,
and is proud of it, by the way, you walk away, you leave your rights at the table if you don't vote or if you don't participate in this process. I'm sorry if that sounds, I don't know.
How dare you?
How exactly? We're not talking about disenfranchising people. We want to enfranchise everyone, every voter, regardless of whether they agree with us or not. The Libertarian Party is the ultimate big tent. So it would be hypocritical of us to give people or not give people the opportunity to debate us aggressively on these issues. In fact, we open it up to everyone. I think there's a little bit of fear there, though.
Right. As you know, this past week, P.O., I've made myself available to any media outlet that wants to talk, and I think that has helped my campaign because they have figured out that I'm not your typical, and I hate to use this, third-party crazy.
Right. No, we're. I'm sorry. Did I say we? Oops. There is a committed group of individuals in the state of Rhode Island who, on a long-term basis, see the future of an emerging second party in this state. Not as a third party, not as an alternative, but a legitimate second party in the state called the Libertarian Party. It's a national party. The presidential candidate, Gary Johnson, eclipsed the 1% of the vote, set a record for votes in this last election, an election that was hotly contested, an election where a lot of people said, let me throw this in. In the presidential election, the waste the vote concept came up. What do you say to wasting the vote?
Anytime that you have to choose between the lesser of two evils, that's a waste of vote. So I've had many, many Republicans this past time in 2012 come up to you and say, man, I hate Romney, but I'm going to vote for him anyway because he's the party's candidate. That is just so, just should be like a punch in the gut to you. That is so depressing.
Right, because if you're politically observant, if you're so politically sentient that you're cognizant of the issues that you have with each individual candidate, then why, I don't know, why give up like that? It just seems awfully weak. I mean, I look at both of the candidates you're running against. Ralph Mollis, clearly, if there was a poster child for bad government in this state, he never knew that the people pimping 38 Studios could be considered lobbyists. What, me worry? Then look at the Republican side. I call her Catherine Taylor Chafee. Here's a woman who, since 1988, according to her own published LinkedIn resume, has spent less than 4 years working in the dreaded private sector. She has, I actually voted for her when she ran for Secretary of State a few years ago because I thought she seemed like a great alternative and just a really good standalone candidate. seemingly minutes after she lost the election and narrowly lost to A. Ralph Mollis, the first thing she did was sell out to get a government job with what I believe is possibly the most loathed gubernatorial administration in this state's history. And to beat baby Gerber Ed Dupree, that's saying something. But this woman has worked her entire life in the political sphere. People like this don't seem to exist. I almost want to pay for a picture or a sighting outside of the immediate range of either Smith Hill or any sort of federal governmental building, because none of these folks seem to exist outside of the political world. Their entire livelihood has been based on some type of political job, some type of job where they can live off the government team. I call that welfare.
And I think an advantage to my campaign going forward is the fact that the two mainstream candidates, should they win their respective primaries, are essentially running on the same platform. There's a few different caveats on how they'd like to waste the money, but they're running on pretty much the same platform. So
right.
I hope people realize that.
If you're a Republican and Catherine Taylor Chafee wants to run on how efficiently she can run the exchange, wait a minute. Folks, you are, as a Republican, are going to nominate a candidate who brags about how well she can run the federal health care program that you purport to loathe because you're so interested in nominating a Republican as opposed to nominating or electing the right person for the job. I just find that repulsive.
Repugnant, even.
Yeah, I resemble that remark. Well, it's been another great week on the Coalition on Talk Radio. AM 790, your station for, everything. We're going to come back next week live again. Put the word out. We're taking calls, and we're not taking prisoners. So, Tony, thanks for coming on.
And it's not even a 1-900 number like the calls you usually take.
Good luck in the election,
Had
Tony.
to get one zing in before I went out.
God bless you, lad. And us, the Coalition on Talk Radio.